And someone like Marco, who has some incredible recent success, the double defending LAIC champion, already a regional final to his name this year as well. Of course, the Stockholm top 4 and 2020 OCIC champion. Someone that has played in many, many major finals now and has the experience to draw on to make sure that he is, on top of his game, holding his nerve when it comes to these big moments. When we talk about big moments, I don't know that anyone has more of them under their belt than Wolfe.
And that's the conversation when we were talking about the best players of all time. Because if you're looking back historically, you're looking at accomplishment. I mean, Wolfe is right up there in the conversation. But if you're looking as well, the caliber of play, even if you don't have that same list of accomplishments, you don't have that world championship title, Marco Silva has been considered as one of the best modern day players, and it's so easy to see why. Even playing a team that there's not necessarily the most people on, he's been able to accomplish so much. This team got second in Gdansk, it got the LAIC title, and has the possibility to take down Toronto. Charizard, Torkoal, Jump Left, you have the Sun, but then also key pieces, the Ursa Luna with a Guts Flame Orb and a Porygon too. So even when the dimensions aren't quite in your favor, the game still can be.
Plenty of tools to get around Shadow Tag as well. Again, we talked about that eject pack tech on the Torkoal, which can allow it to swap itself out after losing any kind of stat drops. But at the same time, there are 3 Ghost-type Terras on Marco's team, so you can only use one of those in any given game, but the option is there. Of course, Parting Shot on Incineroar also will be able to pivot it out, is not blocked by that Shadow Tag. So no shortage of tools that he can use, just has to very carefully pick which ones to bring to any given game.
And that terrestrialization with all these Pokemon is going to be so important because you want the Ghost, you want stuff that's not going to be perishing to a Kingdra. That is going to be key. As for Wolfe, very familiar spawn and a team that we've become quite familiar with through the course of this competition. And again, the Perish Song, you have the Politoed, but Kingdra as well is something that in this, if you can get the weather in your favor, can off-put so much pressure. Of course, Marco does have 2 ways of setting that weather. He does have both Sunny Day on that Jump Left if he chooses to bring it, as well as the Torkoal. So the Kingdra might not necessarily be in its prime position, but even a Draco Meteor is something that can start to shred through Marco's team.
Especially given that the Kingdra is the Stellar Terra. It's not just water to boost the Muddy Water and Weather Balls, but you do have the one-time boost to Draco Meteor as well. And looking at Marco's team, there isn't too much that can stomach that. I think maybe Porygon 2 could, just because it is so bulky, but otherwise, there are no Dragon resistances, either in natural types or Terra typing over on Marco's side of the field. You have to, again, look at kind of the lack of water resistances. You have the Jump Off, which will resist it, but the other 5 Pokemon, 4 of them are straight up weak to water, and the last is Porygon, so you don't really have a great way to stomach these water type attacks in the rain.
And if you want to try and win out this weather war and be able to bring the sun, well then maybe you're going to be a little bit more susceptible to the other key pieces of this team, which is going to be super dangerous within this. And even something like the Sarchalodon, it does have the Power Herb, so you don't need the rain to get off a really powerful attack. So there's a lot to this, a match these players are familiar with. So let's see how this changes up as we head into the grand finals here in Toronto. Make some noise. Jump Pluck and Incineroar for Marco. For Wolfe, that's Gothitelle and Kingdra.
I really, really love this Gothitelle Kingdra lead from Wolfe in general. It's a very flexible lead. It traps these 2 Pokemon on the field, and most importantly, it gives Wolfe the option to pivot that Gothitelle out into Politoed, set up the rain, and immediately activate Swift Swim and power up those water-type moves from the Kingdra. I'd like the Jump Life here as well, though the Covert Cloak means it can't be faked out by Gothitelle, and you do have the option to start spreading Sleep Powders if you need to.
And when you're eyeing up something like the speed control, seeing that there is this Kingdra on the other end, you could have been punished with the potential of something like this Trick Room, but instead the swap out. That's Gothitelle leaving, Incineroar coming on in as Tailwind. Marco is going to have the speed favor in his turn for the next few turns, is now a knockoff into that Kingdra. A little bit of damage, Life Orb gone. This is going to be reducing the amount of damage as Draco Meteor into the Jump Bluff, brings it down to just below half health, and with that special attack drop, the Kingdra's not going to be doing the most on the next turn.
Big knockoff there. Some decent damage into Kingdra, but importantly removing the Life Orb, which is a big source of damage. That's one multiplier lost when you start stacking them with the Rain, with the possible Stellar Terra. And so that's a lot of damage that also kept this Jump Off relatively healthy. I don't know if one more Draco Meteor would finish the job, and of course no Water-type move would knock it out from here as well. but this Incineroar switch from Wolfe also very, very safe. You know, it can't be put to sleep because of that, because of those safety goggles. You now have the option to go for your own fake out on this coming turn, and of course you can just pivot right back out with Parting Shot.
Even if one Pokemon is safe from the sleep powder, the other is not, and Kingdra doesn't do the most damage and now won't do any damage as it has to take a turn of sleep. Parting Shot into the Incineroar, that's going to be attack drop as well as a way to pivot out into something that could take a little bit more advantage of his situation and a chance and opportunity for us to see what Marco has brought to this match. Ursaluna and Porygon 2.
You better hope there's no knockoff coming into that slot though, because losing that Flame Orb would be very, very rough for Marco. That is a big bit of damage that would no longer be available. Kingdra takes its first mandatory sleep turn from that Sleep Powder and knockoff straight into Ursaluna. There is no Flame Orb, there is no burn, there is no guts for the remainder of this game.
And that hurts, getting the damage, but most importantly in that knockoff. And when you need the damage, Marco's team, when you're eyeing up this Jumpluff and Incineroar, the Porygon 2, it's the Ursaluna that you're really counting on. And in this situation, if you were able to get that swapped in that burn, you could pressure so much damage with something like an Earthquake on the next, especially since you wouldn't be hitting into your own Jumpluff, and you would hit everything else on the field. Now that damage is so heavily reduced.
Not even just losing the Guts boost, Facade will now be locked at the 70 base power for the rest of this game too. If Wolfe has something that can, you know, Terastallize into, maybe something that resists or is even just neutral to ground, Facade is usually the move of choice after that, but it will be mitigated for the rest of this game.
And that could be a situation where you're then forced into something that's a single target, and doubly so now that Porygon 2 comes out onto the field, getting that attack boost. Terastallization, we got to see the lock-in. Make sure that this Ursaluna is nice and safe going into that Ghost Terastallization.
Ghost will mean that it is no longer weak to water, which could be a big deal for Marco later on in this game. Wolfe not switching anything out, though, means that Kingdra will stay on the field and possibly even Terastallize, though I bet this is the Incineroar instead.
Even if this Ursaluna isn't doing as much damage, it could still do a lot when you see this Headlong Rush. So into this Ghost Terastallization, a way to make sure, again, less and less damage is coming on out. Into this Incineroar, it's lost that weakness, so much damage, but not nearly enough to get that KO. Of course, a defense, special defense drop, and Kingdra is going to wake up. Draco Meteor yet again connected. It is -2 into the Porygon. That's going to be fine, but still, you would have loved to see that sleeping for just a little bit longer.
Incineroar surviving that Headlong Rush, thanks to the Ghost Terastallization, means it will have the opportunity to Parting Shot this Ursaluna, further mitigating its damage while it is on the field. And even though you could bring in Gothitelle to activate the Shadow Tag, this is another reason why this Ghost Terra is very helpful for Marco, is that now that Ursaluna is a Ghost type, you do have the option to swap it out, reset that Parting Shot drop, and you have to kind of imagine that Kingdra probably swaps out this turn because it is at -4, and the Incineroar is right there for another Intimidate onto the Ursaluna. Which could be another reason to get this Ursaluna off the field ASAP.
Yeah, especially too when you do have that Gothitelle, something like bringing in the Incineroar is just so free. You get another attack drop onto that Ursaluna. You're not really worried about too much damage, and Kingdra can get back in at a later time and be so good. And when I'm looking at the pieces of Marco's team, if Wolfe can start damaging these down, we have Pokemon when you're eyeing up that Porygon 2 that like that longevity on the field, and of course, that's not a playstyle that Wolfe's going to allow you to do.
It's really not. You still have to be very careful here. Kingdra will swap out to reset that -4 special attack. And we're going to see the Politoed come in instead. So no Incineroar just yet. Will be there to set up the rain with Drizzle as the Gothitelle has the chance to go for something like a fake out on its first turn out, but no fake out just yet.
Nope. Instead, you're going to see another move of choice, this Headlong Rush. Not even enough to bring the the Politoed, the other Pokemon down below half, as that's going to be Psychic into Ursaluna, doing more and more damage since we have been seeing the Ursaluna lowering its stats through these turns. Now Porygon 2 is going to be the one twisting these dimensions.
Trick Room set up, so Ursaluna should be the first thing acting, which is, you know, a nice twist for Wolfe here, for Marco here rather, especially because the Tailwind has just ended on Marco's side of the field. But if you are Wolfe, you're now noticing that there is no Torkoal on Marco's side, so Rain will stick around for a little bit longer. Gothitelle, being the bulky Pokemon that it is, has the ability to try and reset Trick Room this turn if it wants to, or even just go for a second Psychic into that Ursaluna. Now at -3 special defense because of the 2 Headlong Rushes and the drop from the Psychic on the previous turn is vulnerable.
So with it being so vulnerable, a Protect makes sense. Or a Psychic yet again, trying to fire off into that slot, get rid of that big bad bear, nothing happening. Now the Porygon 2 will have the opportunity to attack into this Politoed. Just another attempt at just chipping away as Parasong, the move of choice. Of course, since the Ursaluna has Terrestrialize, it will be able to have this opportunity to swap out, but the Porygon 2 won't.
Interesting choice there from Wolfe. This Ursaluna will have the ability to swap out, like you just said, Sierra, which means that the Parasong won't be very effective on it. But this Porygon 2 is locked on the field. And given that this Ursaluna is at -1 attack, this Porygon 2 did not get a downloaded special attack boost. It got the attack boost instead. This Gothitelle isn't super threatened by anything, and this could be a good way for Wolfe to get rid of just this Porygon, really. If you can get rid of Porygon with this Parasong, that's the bulkiest thing that Marco has left on his team, and that can clear out an easier way for Kingdra to try and come in and win this game in the end.
And if this Ursaluna has to swap out at some point, this Incineroar would not appreciate a Weather Ball, and well, Jumpluff won't really appreciate much at this point, considering the amount of damage that it's already taken. So Ursaluna, that's finally going to be the swap out, but if Wolfe decides not to just protect and hits into the other slot, Marco could still be down on this. It is going to be just a swap from both trainers as Jumpluff hits the field, Politoed leaves, make sure that Paris gets reset, and Incineroar for Wolfe to have Fake Out on the next turn.
Fake Out will now be active. Intimidate comes through, meaning absolutely nothing into these two. Well, one special attacker and one no attacker. Psychic will be into this Jumpluff, though, and it barely hangs on, which means that Wolfe will not have a Pokemon advantage just yet. And Terra Blast quickly targeting that Gothitelle as the Ghost-type Incineroar that would have come in or would have taken 0 damage.
Yeah, and this damage output from this Porygon 2 is not, like, maybe something that stacks up, maybe try and fish for a freeze or something, but Jumpluff, especially with the speed ordering that you caused yourself with your own Trick Room, isn't something that's necessarily benefiting that Pokemon. And once this Ursaluna goes down, it already wasn't dealing the most damage, but then where is the damage really coming from? Sorry, the Ursaluna, Porygon 2. The Porygon 2 is probably the only thing that really does damage if this Ursaluna doesn't get that Guts boost.
Exactly.
All right, Rage Powder from this Jumpluff. So it is going to be the center of attention. Sliver of health. Porygon 2, it's going to have a little bit more opportunity to try and fight this battle, as finally that second Psychic is going to be enough. Porygon 2, I mean, it doesn't even get to do anything because of the flinch. So yeah, we're just going to see a very sad Porygon after this next turn, since it has one more turn of Perish left.
I really liked that Rage Powder play. If you caught it before the turn started, Marco actually targeted his own Jumpluff with Ice Beam as well, which is really cool. It's a nice way to make sure that Jumpluff goes down, so you do get the swap into your Incineroar on this turn without having to manually swap it back in. Of course, you couldn't even manually swap it because of that Shadow Tag. So it guarantees that this Jumpluff isn't stuck on the field being like an entirely sink of momentum that makes Marco have something to do on this turn. Porygon will faint at the end of this turn thanks to that Perish Song, which will open up the opportunity for Wolfe to have that kind of 4 Pokemon to 2 remaining checkmate with another Perish Song from Politoed.
And now we're going to have to protect from Incineroar for Wolfe, as the one over on the other end hits the field. Another round of Psychic, of course, into this Porygon 2. Is the damage that won't necessarily matter, since it's going to be gone anyways. And Gothitelle finally brought right below half, which means it gets a Citrus Berry, and it gets to go kind of back where that turn started.
But it will actually be knocked out by a Parasong at the end of this turn as well. I believe it was on the field subject to that Parasong when Politoed went for it. And now the Perish counts fall to 0. So Gothitelle and Porygon 2 will be knocked out. But I think that's a very worthwhile trade if you're Wolfe. You no longer need Shadow Tag, as Marco only has 2 Pokemon remaining. Your Gothitelle, it's going to be hard to switch it in and out without giving your other Pokemon too much damage. And now that especially that Trick Room has ended, you can bring Kingdra in here, you can swap the Incineroar to Politoed, and you have some pretty devastating Muddy Waters on the table.
Yeah, you don't even have to go for any sort of Parasong to try and close this out. That mid-game Parasong is going to be enough to possibly just get this done now that Kingdra's out on the field. And the Ursaluna's not doing much. Incineroar won't appreciate this, and Wolfe in a really, really strong spot already.
Especially because this Kingdra doesn't have that Life Orb anymore, really doesn't need it for the power. One Weather Ball should be able to knock out Ursaluna from this low HP, and because it is missing that item, the knockoff from Marco's own Incineroar will not have the damage boost. So you can probably even ignore that Incineroar this turn, make sure that the Ursaluna doesn't get an attack off here, and go straight for that Weather Ball.
And already so low health. Like you said, you don't need that Life Orb to be picking up this KO, and all of a sudden it's Incineroar against the world. And when we're eyeing up an Incineroar that only has the knockoff really for attacking, since Flare Blitz isn't really going to accomplish much against these Pokemon, nonetheless in the rain, it's going to be a situation where Wolfe will be able to take this game 1, and Marco is going to go right back to the drawing board as he throws in the towel. Wolfe up 1 in the series.
What a crazy game. It was it was very back and forth at certain points, but looking at the end game state here, Wolfe lost Gothitelle to his own Perish Song and then no other Pokemon. So essentially knocked out 5 Pokemon in 1 game, right? So Marco really didn't have the space to get a whole lot done, despite the fact that he had some windows there. The Ghost type Ursaluna was very nice because it afforded him the chance to do some switching alongside the parting shot, even with Gothitelle on the field. But losing that Flame Orb was huge because the damage that Ursaluna was doing was so heavily mitigated thanks to not having Guts active.
Looking at this match, Marco just needs to be a step ahead to be able to get this Ursaluna in on his switch, be able to shut things down with this jump bluff. But Wolfe was the one that was ahead, being able to kind of just outplay and outcall these moves. And already what is a tough matchup for Marco. So being able to limit those options, just really close out any window. And I'm intrigued, like, where is this game 2 go? Because when you're looking at something like the jump bluff, well, you got the speed control, you got the sleep powder, and in the end, none of it mattered.
I think that what Wolfe is doing expertly, not only in this match, but all weekend, has been knowing when he can make certain plays that are really, really hard to punish. The way that Wolfe wins a lot of these games is by maintaining a Pokemon advantage and then threatening Perish Song at the end of the game, or just allowing Kingdra the space to come in and clean up at the very end. And none of the things that Wolfe did in that first game really opened himself up to Marco making some kind of big read and capitalizing on Wolfe making a certain play that he might see coming. There was really no threat from Marco really at any point in this game, again, especially after the Ursaluna lost that Flame Orb.
And even when you're looking at the rest of the team, it's hard to see what else could be a threat.
Yeah.
Incineroar is something on these Sun teams that can do a lot of damage with the Flare Blitz, but when the rain is up the entire time, it's just a sad little cat, unfortunately. Yeah. The Porygon 2 did nothing and then was just Perish Songed out of the entire game. And Charizard doesn't appreciate trying to hit fire moves into these water-type Pokemon. So kicking off our game number 2, we're going to see an Incineroar apiece for our competitors, and Jump Left yet again a reappearance, and Kingdra again for Wolfe.
We're seeing the Intimidate come out from Marco's Incineroar first. I think that makes sense given that, on a lot of Perish Song teams, you kind of want your Pokemon to be slower, especially when you can take advantage of Trick Room as well. So it's probably safe to assume that Marco's Incineroar is just trained to be faster, which means that you do have the option to fake out first. You could possibly go for a fake out into your own, into the opposing Incineroar rather. But we did see the Ghost Terra on Incineroar put in so much work for Wolfe in that first game, and it might be something that he opts to use in the second game as well.
Yeah, so it makes sense to look at something like this Kingdra that is still really threatening on this turn. For Marco, you can see there's the decision, do I Sunny Day, do I Tailwind? Because all of a sudden, if Wolfe does decide to swap out that Incineroar, bring this Politoed in and attack with this Kingdra, that could be bye-bye Incineroar for Marco, but instead, protect. No fake out, no damage. Kingdra is going to be safe. So Marco will be able to go ahead and set up this Tailwind and get the speed in his favor. Now Wolfe will have an Incineroar able to act, and where it's going to target, that'll be the knockoff. So just a little bit of damage into that jump bluff.
I really like the knockoff there too, because the damage is nice, but removing the Covert Cloak is really big. That was preventing Wolfe from going for fake outs into that jump bluff in that first game. But now that the Covert Cloak is gone, fake out is on the table. Either the Gothitelle or the Incineroar on Wolfe's side of the field now can prevent jump bluff from moving, but not just yet as Sleep Powder comes through.
Kingdra's having a bad game so far, going to be sleeping. And when we're talking about Pokemon getting things knocked off, that is going to be Incineroar on Marco's end, acting first, and Safety Goggles eliminated from the other end. So now Marco on this next turn can go ahead and try and Sleep Powder into that Incineroar as well. Parting Shot, so that might be a Sleep Powder save for down the line, and a new target coming on into the field. 2
very convenient knockoffs in a row. First to enable Fake Out, and now to enable Sleep Powder into that slot. One of the strengths of the Incineroar on Wolfe's side of the field is that it was very easily able to switch into this combination of Jump Off and Incineroar, and now that is no longer the case. This Gothitelle, again, does have Fake Out active, so you can prevent either of these 2 Pokemon from acting this turn, but then what? Like, your Kingdra's asleep, maybe it can wake up this turn again, get that nice 1-turn wake, but then you still have to worry about Sleep Powder coming through from Jump Left, and if you're Marco, that can be a way to find some space in this matchup to, start getting some damage out and not let Wolfe control the game again.
I'm just looking at the and then what coming out for Marco in this situation too, because the Kingdra's sleeping, but it can be waking up at any time. That's going to be a parting shot into own Jump Left to secure a promised switch out for the Incineroar in face of the fact it wouldn't be able to switch out before thanks to that Shadow Tag.
And parting shotting yourself makes a lot of sense there because it guarantees that even if Wolfe happens to get a double protect off on this turn, you are able to swap out, and you don't care about lowering your jump plus stats because it doesn't have any attacking moves. Ursaluna is able to swap in here without taking any damage, without taking a knockoff, and now Flame Orb activates. So we finally have the Guts Ursaluna, and now that Tailwind is up, these very strong Earthquakes that threaten damage into everything on Wolf's side of the field are on the table.
And this is where we can finally see this Pokemon be able to do some damage with the Ursaluna, and where this little change that Marco has on his team in comparison to other ways that these jump lefts are ran can be made. We do have the Sunny Day. So if you are thinking that maybe Wolf is going to try and switch that Gothitelle out into the Politoed, since Kingdra does have a chance to wake up on this turn, you can just Sunny Day, reset that, and just go for a big attack with this Ursaluna. So eyeing it up. We'll have to see, of course, if the Kingdra's going to wake up. But for now, Gothitelle is switching out. Politoed is going to join the field. So it looks like Marco might have made the right call because, of course, Politoed is going to bring this rain. But the jump left right after this Terastallization moment. Let's hold on a second. But we'll get to see a weather rewrite real soon as Kingdra. That's going to be the Stellar Terastallization, putting everything on this turn.
It's going to be interesting because the Sunny Day should come out here first thanks to the Tailwind. And after Kingdra loses its speed boost from Swift Swim, Ursaluna will attack next. Unless it's trained to be very, very slow, but no, Earthquake comes out.
I would hope not when you're having it next to it, yeah. Tailwind. Marco knows what he's doing. Kingdra will wake up, taking a lot of damage, but Weather Ball, of course, this is going to be a different type of Weather Ball now with that sun hitting into the Ursaluna. Good amount of damage, but that's not the damage that we would have liked to see if the weather was still the rain. And now you're still going to have the advantage of the speed onto this next turn.
A really nice turn from Marco there, knowing that Politoed very likely swaps in for that Gothitelle to activate both the Swift Swim and the damage boost from the water typing and the Weather Ball. And even though that Weather Ball still did a huge chunk of damage, again, it is still boosted by the Stellar Terra, so nice reason for that Stellar Terra to be on the team here. Kingdra didn't do nearly enough to this Ursaluna, and Politoed is on the field with the sun up. So this is probably the most ideal situation you could ever hope for if you're Marco here. This Politoed cannot hit the field on this coming turn to reset the rain because you have to swap it out first.
Yeah, and even if there is a switch going around with that Tailwind just leaving, Marco can go ahead and reset it up in a situation where this Ursaluna is still going to be able to attack. So it's just going to be a double switch on out from Wolf. So both of these are going to be the targets of this Earthquake, though Incineroar will at least try and drop the attack a little bit, but I still don't think it's going to appreciate what's coming next.
It really won't, especially because Tailwind immediately goes back up, re-establishing the speed boost on Marco's side of the field, and another Earthquake comes through here. Intimidate is active, so maybe not big one-hit KOs here, but still so much damage.
The Incineroar is just going to hold on a sliver of health, so Wolf's not going to lose either Pokemon on this swap-in, and now has the double fake-out pressure. And reminder, first turn of this match, we did see the knockoff into the jump left slot, so it doesn't have the Covert Cloak anymore, and it also doesn't have a way to protect.
It can't protect, but unless you fake it out, you could pretty easily go straight for more Sunny Days. You don't need the Tailwind boost anymore because you've already set that up. Sleep Hunter doesn't necessarily buy you a whole lot, but if you do Sunny Day again, that would prevent Wolf's Politoed from coming in and getting rid of that sun, which could be a big deal. Also, I guess Sleep Hunter too. Maybe you could Sleep Hunter either of these Pokemon because, again, that safety goggles was knocked off, and then try and buy some more time. You do have the Ghost Terastallization in play with Ursaluna as well, but no, straight for the fake out.
Yeah, so that's going to be an Ursaluna. It doesn't act, and jump left that's not much better off is going to be a Sleep Powder miss. And Trick Room, Marco had the speed, and that is going to be to his detriment, as all of his speedy Pokemon are going to be oh so slow. Ursaluna at this point now, sure, that's a burn that you needed to get through this match and deal the damage, but it's a burn that you don't have much attacking time left.
You really don't, especially now because this Ursaluna will be knocked out to 2 more turns of burn. You're tempted to maybe try and protect it to make sure it doesn't take any damage on this turn from either Incineroar or Gothitelle. But if you do, you only have 1 more turn left, and given that we've talked about Wolf's team having 6 protects, you can kind of guarantee that Ursaluna doesn't attack again unless it's on this turn.
Yeah, and even you just have the speed on your favor, so you don't even have to play the I'm just going to wait you out game if you want to. You can just go for the straight, hey, I'm going to take some KOs games. So yeah, Incineroar will be protecting on this one. You still have to be worrying about the threat of this jump left and the Sleep Powder. So we'll play the slow and steady game instead. Both of the Pokemon are going to go ahead and protect.
You have to wonder if the Trick Room actually helps Wolf that much going forward. Like, you do get to mitigate that Tailwind, but after these 2 Pokemon on Wolf's side of the field go down, you have the Politoed and the Kingdra left, and you don't necessarily want Trick Room up for that Kingdra. So you might think, you know, is Wolfe going to try and reset Trick Room on this coming turn, knowing that Ursaluna will be knocked out, Tailwind will be running out soon, and neither of these Pokemon can switch out.
And this is where, for the jump left, you're also just pinned into just having to click for this Rage Powder to make sure that this Ursaluna does have an opportunity to attack. And jump left does still have a good amount of health. And even looking at the fact this Incineroar for Wolfe doesn't have Flare Blitz, it would most likely have to be this double up. Knockoff will be the first, a critical hit, but it's not going to be enough. The Psychic is going to be forced to target into this. Jump left goes down. Ursaluna, one more attack for the road before it too is going to be KO'd in this match. And Earthquake hits everything. Incineroar on his sliver is gone, and Gothitelle will hold on just a little longer.
Ursaluna will be knocked out by the burn though, so the Pokemon count is now 3-2 in Wolfe's favor. This is exactly the kind of situation where Wolfe can potentially bring in Politoed and go straight for what could be a game-ending Perish Song. Sunlight does fade, and I do believe Tailwind is still active, so that means that since Trick Room is up, Wolfe will have the speed advantage.
Yeah, and that is exactly...
Nope, it just ended.
It just ended.
There it is.
When we're still looking at the speed tiers of the Pokemon, we will see Porygon 2 in the back, but there you said it. Politoed, that'll be one that is hitting the field, though it does have an Incineroar to contend with on the other end.
This is really tough. You know, but this is a situation where the Porygon 2 is probably not going to be knocked out by a combination of attacks in the next few turns, but if you're not getting rid of this Politoed, you can just get Perish Songed, and if you ignore the Gothitelle, then Kingdra might even come in and start threatening some strong attacks here. So it's really tough position to be in if you're Marco, because I think if you get a single turn wrong, if you let Perish Song go up, if you give Kingdra a free swap to start firing off some strong water type attacks in the rain, this game can be over really fast.
And that's the tricky situation. This is such a tough matchup for Marco, and it's been proven so even more up against an opponent like Wolfe. So two healthy Pokemon, but definitely not in the greatest of situations. And if you're looking at a reversal, I mean, you have to call this right. Would this be enough?
I don't know. It just depends on what you do with this Incineroar as well. You can fake out either of these two Pokemon, but Gothitelle opts to not allow that to happen, going straight for the Protect instead.
When you're eyeing up the fake out on the other end and two Pokemon that are on a third of their health, the Protects just make so much sense, especially since it seems like the time is more so on your side. Now, no fake out, no hits coming out from this Porygon 2, but it does give a passive turn to reverse the speed orders.
The scary thing too now is that this Incineroar just used Fake Out in front of a Politoed with Encore. So if you don't know that your Incineroar is faster than Politoed, it could just be locked into Fake Out for the remainder of this game. There's a chance Politoed is slower. I don't know that we've seen that interaction just yet, but because, again, Wolfe really wants his Pokemon to be very slow for the purpose of Perish Song and for Trick Room, there's a very decent chance Incineroar has just doomed itself to Fake Out for the next few turns.
I don't know, we've seen this Politoed underspeed so much in this match, but it seems like a Trick Room that had to happen to have any opportunity to try and make sure this Perish Song wasn't going to be happening. Maybe like a, you know, it's done if you do, it's done if you don't, but now it's going to be the Ghost Terrestrialization to at least try and set this Incineroar up for a little bit more success. Now we'll have to see where the speeding is going to be coming on out. Knockoff into Politoed. No Perish Song for Wolfe. No Politoed, and two Pokemon left.
Thankfully, that Incineroar is faster for Marco, so a really important break there. Terra Blast into Gothitelle is not enough for a KO, which means Gothitelle does have the chance to Psychic this Porygon for a little bit of damage. But with Kingdra coming in, already having taken so much damage, that special defense drop, though, could be a little bit important.
Yeah, when we're looking at this speed tiering, we're looking at this Kingdra, and we're looking at a Porygon 2 that you kind of need to be sticking around. This Kingdra is, now that this Trick Room has been reversed, it does have the Swift Spin, so it's going to be fast. And it does have that Stellar Terrestrialization too, so something like a Draco Meteor into that Porygon 2, would that be enough after that drop?
It might be enough, but then you just leave this Incineroar alone, and if you do, then it probably just knocks off your Kingdra for a KO here. This is actually, I think, a more strong position for Marco in this scenario, because I don't know that Wolfe has the offense left, especially considering this Kingdra, has to go for these Muddy Waters now.
That's a double connect, though, onto this turn. Neither is going to be super effective. Both will be hanging on through that. The Kingdra, so much damage with this Muddy Water in the rain. Have to see, I don't think any accuracy drops either. We get the Citrus Berry recovery, and with that, Marco will be able to follow up. Knockoff is going to take that Kingdra down. That was so close. That could have been the game-winning, the regional-winning Muddy Water, but holding on just a sliver of health. Now Terra Blast, the Porygon 2, wasn't able to finish the Gothitelle off last time, but will this time. We're now tied and get to go to a regional champion deciding game 3.
Really well played by Marco after what was a pretty rough game 1. He really struggled to find footing in that first game, but in the second game, didn't feel like he was ever under much of a threat from Wolfe's Pokemon. Wolfe never found a position where Kingdra could come in and pretty freely start getting off those attacks. And of course, the Ursaluna on Marco's side, much more impactful in this game because it did get to fire off those guts-boosted Earthquakes. And when you have a team like Wolfe's that doesn't really pack a ground resistance, it's really, really important to keep that Ursaluna at bay.
And even the setup that Marco was able to do in that, we were looking at the situation where, hey, this Ursaluna doesn't necessarily have the most health left and is going to be KO'd after a turn or two of this burn. Well, then Wolfe goes for the passive, decides to go for the double protect, and that just opens the window for Marco to reverse the Trick Room, get back into a regular speed order, and make sure that this Politoed doesn't get to do what has just gone and wrecked everyone else through this tournament, and that was absolutely huge. But then also, if you don't protect and you let this fire off one more move, especially with the jump bluff, going for those Rage Powders, you're just done either way. And that was so close at the end. With how little HP that Porygon 2 had, I actually thought maybe like there was a world, especially after that special defense drop. But honestly, so clutch. And I cannot wait to see how this is played out for our game 3.
Knowing that Incineroar now is faster than Politoed is a really big deal for Marco. That could be something he could have intuited going into this game, just knowing that, again, Perish Trap teams, things like to be very, very slow. And especially if you've trained your Incineroar a little bit in speed, it might be safe to assume that it moves first, but now you're no longer under the threat of that Encore after a fake out. Immediately with the weather mode though, Wolfe leading that Politoed Kingdra, the tried and true duo from ages past, taking the Intimidate, but who really cares because they're both special attackers. Drizzle goes up, rain is set, and there is no Torkoal in the back, so no sun just yet.
And with this lead and making sure the weather is set for Wolfe, this is dangerous because for Marco, if you want to make sure this Kingdra isn't going super duper fast, you either have to go for a fake out into it, in which case the Politoed can try and go for something, or you got to go for a Sunny Day, but you can't do everything. Sleep Powder also has this opportunity to miss.
Yes.
So that is a very dangerous prospect. Kingdra with the Protect, though, of course, when you are looking at this fake out pressure on the opposing end, it is something that only the one actually, the Politoed didn't protect.
No, it didn't. An Encore or Weather Ball here could be very devastating for Marco if Wolfe calls this correctly. Tailwind is set up, which establishes the speed advantage, but what did this Politoed do?
That's going to be the Encore, and into this jump bluff. It's not going to have the opportunity to go for the Sunny Day on the next turn. That was the most important decision of the first match, and now forced into a swap. And when you're looking at this Kingdra that now has this Swift Swim, and that life orb still intact, there is about to be some devastating damage out on the board.
Despite the tailwind, this Incineroar will not act before Kingdra thanks to Swift Swim, and now you either have to switch in this Ursaluna to a possible Muddy Water, which might just knock it out right off the bat, or switch in your Porygon, which you really need to keep healthy, because it is one of your most important pieces on this team, just to have a little bit of bulk. You know, maybe reverse some Trick Rooms or set up some Trick Rooms given the scenario. That is a really, really good Encore from Wolfe there, knowing that if the jump off went for either Sunny Day or Tailwind, that's so much momentum lost.
So we will have to see the jump left switch out onto this turd, and Porygon 2, again, like you said, that Ursaluna after a Muddy Water, that would not be hanging on very well. So we'll have to see that swap as Terrestrialization coming on out. Before, we've gotten to see that it was the Kingdra for the Stellar Terrestrialization, but it's going to be Marco into that Ghost type. Make sure that you're going to try and survive this hit at any edger. Now, Weather Ball instead. We're not going to worry about accuracy checks. We're going for one Pokemon and one Pokemon only, but not enough to pick up the KO.
Huge burst of damage there. Incineroar will be able to eat its Citrus Berry to heal up some of that damage, but it still lost so much HP, and now it is in a space where it really can't swap into moves anymore. Parting Shot coming out will lower the special attack of Kingdra, which helps a little bit, but at the same time, like, you're not doing any damage this turn.
Absolutely not. At least if you want to be eyeing up something like this jump left, you no longer are on court, so you can go for a Weather Override. And since Politoed is out on the field still, it is going to be a weather that it can't override for a little bit. And Weather Ball into the jump left is not going to necessarily be the most effective of cases. So this is still dangerous because when you're still staring down the Kingdra on the other end, again, something that this Draco Meteor can do so much. And if the jump up can't overset the weather, or even get a speed control, well, that can also be a really dangerous situation.
The scary part here is that, you didn't lose any Pokemon this turn, which is great, but you had to give up the Terrestrialization, you had to give up so much damage on Incineroar, and you had to bring this jump off back in here, even though Wolf still has the Incineroar in the back, to possibly swap into Sleep Powders.
And this Sleep Powder that is about to come up could be the regional deciding one. At least you're not going to take a hit from the Kingdra. If you're swapping a Pokemon out and it's going to be a hit from the Kingdra right away, it can be so dangerous. But it's going to be this turn for the Kingdra slot that Intimidate comes onto the field. So that's going to be a safety goggles with it as Porygon 2 swaps out. And barring not getting KO'd, the Ursaluna will be able to get the switch in to get that Flame Orb activation on this turn. As now we get to see Terrestrialization from Wolf. Now this is going to be the Politoed. This is not one we've gotten to see into that grass type. So even if it was a Sleep Powder target there, it would be null and void. Nothing would happen.
I love this Terrestrialization. Sleep Powder, it doesn't matter which target, the Safety Goggles and the Grass Terra will block it, and Politoed gets to set up a Perish Song instead. That was a great play by Wolf here, just to force some shuffling by both of these trainers. Of course, there is no Gothitelle out on the field yet, so if Marco wants, he can swap both of these Pokemon out this turn, but in doing so, he would leave the Incineroar and the Porygon 2 in the back vulnerable to taking a lot of damage right off the bat. And of course, we have the option for Wolf to go for that fake out with Incineroar this turn and prevent any damage coming out here, but I really love that play. Terra Grass means you're resisting those ground type moves as well, and this jump bluff really doesn't have a whole lot to do anymore.
Not at all. So that is huge. That last minute Terrestrialization from Wolf. I haven't seen that Politoed yet. And honestly, such a key play. And even for Marco, if you do want to go for this swap to make sure, like, hey, I need to get these Pokemon out of here before the Gothitelle comes in, what is stopping the Politoed from clicking it again? You know you're not going to get KO'd. You know you're not at risk if you're predicting the swap out. And even when you're looking at what can really hit into you this turn, it's not really too much damage, but just fake out, no swaps, Sunny Day.
Sunny Day comes out, which means that Sun will be up for at least the next couple turns, but Fake Out prevents the Ursaluna from going for any attacks. Weather Ball here, now a Fire-type attack thanks to that Sunny Day. Still does a decent chunk to that Ursaluna, but notably does not KO thanks to the Water typing being removed here. And now you're kind of in a similar spot where if you leave this Ursaluna in on the next turn to get some damage off, that could be a big deal, but then you essentially have to swap it out on the next turn, which could leave yourself open to Wolf, seeing that play and immediately punishing it by, targeting whatever comes in.
Would this be the turn even too for Marco where you're looking at maybe going for this double swap if Wolf thinks that Marco's going to go for this attack and just double protects his own Pokemon? Because that could be that small window of opportunity. But of course, if you get it wrong and Wolf does decide to take down one of your Pokemon on the swap in, you could lose there. So a huge call in this match. But Wolf has been clicking Protect so much within this series. So does he double protect here?
It's also an opportunity for Wolf to potentially swap the Gothitelle in if he thinks the Ursaluna will be attacking this turn, and that way you'll lock it on the field for the following turn and make sure it does get knocked out by that Perish Song. Porygon takes the field in place of Jump Bluff, and Wolf does not swap Gothitelle in, instead opts to protect that Politoed.
Politoed is nice and safe and protect from Incineroar, so no damage coming out onto Wolf's end of the field as this Perish Song turns are ticking away. Facade, of course, not going to do anything into that Incineroar. So now we're just at a situation where next turn, well, everything except for the Porygon gets KO'd. So I think next turn we're going to see a lot of switching of Pokemon, especially to Marco isn't trapped on the field. So the Ursaluna does have a swap if you want to go for it. But is this also the opportunity if you wanted to try and attack and get Wolf on these swap-ins of his own?
It's a really tough decision to make. If you leave your Ursaluna in, you can possibly punish Wolf switching, but you're guaranteeing that you're losing that Ursaluna, which is a huge source of damage. Just looking at the rest of Marco's team, if Ursaluna goes down, that is the single Pokemon that can do the most damage left. Next to Jump Bluff, which can do 0 damage, Porygon, which is alright, and then Incineroar, which is already taking a lot of damage itself.
Gothitelle is swapping in, Porygon 2 swapping out. So we get to see Jump Bluff hit the field once again. And with that Earthquake, Incineroar is sticking around, so there will be 2 KOs at the end of this turn. And Gothitelle, a lot of damage. Incineroar doesn't even need to wait for the Perish Song to get KO'd. It's going to get KO'd right here, right now. A lot of damage into the Gothitelle. If you're losing your main source of damage, then that's damage that actually could be really significant.
It could, especially considering that your Porygon and your Incineroar, have the Terra Blast, have the knockoff that can do decent chunks of that Gothitelle. You at least activated its Citrus Berry, so the HP it's at is the max it will have for the remainder of this game. But just looking at Marco's team remaining, if Wolfe has a way to get Kingdra back on the field in the rain, it might be very, very difficult for him to prevent himself from taking too much damage in the process. This Jumpluff, if the rain comes back up, we'll lose that Chlorophyll speed boost. I don't believe Tailwind is currently active, and so there's no chance at some kind of Tailwind Sunny Day play to mitigate that. Kingdra does re-enter the field, so we're in a position where you're very threatened by the idea of a Politoed swap plus a Muddy Water.
And that could be absolutely huge. And the fact that you don't have that speed, at least if one thing is forced to be swapping out, you do have a little bit of advantage with the other Pokemon. And this is getting tough. This has been so intense here for the third match. It's so different in all 3 games.
It really is. The way these trainers have approached these 3 games has differed very heavily. Now we're in a position where both trainers have 3 Pokemon remaining, and it's really hard to call who has the stronger position here. Of course, Marco only has 2 Pokemon that can deal damage, but Wolfe, with the Gothitelle, isn't really doing too much damage on its own. Does still have Kingdra, at a pretty healthy state of HP, but has to be careful not to get put to sleep.
Incineroar is going to be swapping out on this turn, so Porygon 2 coming on out yet again. Consistent with the attacks and no switch for Wolfe. So talking about having speed control later in, that's going to be at least on Marco's end. Draco Meteor into the Porygon 2, just below half health, and a special attack that is now dwindled away onto that strong attacking Pokemon. But if we're talking about speed advantages, Trick Room is going to put it all in Wolfe's favor, though Marco can try and go for this opportunity to try and reverse it, but his Pokemon are going to be so fast now, so slow because of that, thanks to that Tailwind.
And because the Jumpluff is locked on the field here and does not have Protect, this is a prime opportunity to try and double target it with this Gothitelle and Kingdra's Psychic and Draco Meteor. You did have to take that -2 special attack drop with the first Draco Meteor, so I don't know if it will be enough. But if you can secure that KO, most likely before this Jumpluff can move, this could be a game-winning turn.
You need enough damage, and you also need to connect. Instead, we're going to go for something a little bit more accurate, and with the Sun, means this will be a super effective hit, and Jumpluff will be taken care of. Now, Pokemon advantage in Wolfe's favor. Marco down to final 2 Pokemon. Porygon 2 with the Ice Beam into the Kingdra is just not the damage that he needs.
The last turn of Sun there, taking great advantage of that sunny day set up by the Jumpluff. Who needs to, connect your Draco Meteors? Who needs to worry about, the -2 special attack when you have that super effective Life Orb Weather Ball? And now Wolfe has found himself in a Pokemon advantage. The Politoed in the back still in a pretty decently healthy state, especially considering it is that grass type. It is taking super effective damage from Flare Blitz now, but because it sets up the rain when it comes back in, that's a trade I think you're willing to take.
100%. And maybe if Marco had the opportunity that Jumpluff never went down, you could have maybe found a position, but now out of that option and running out of all options in this match, the last 2 Pokemon have taken a lot of damage, and if Wolfe can get the Politoed in safely, it could be a locked match. But even too, this Porygon's taken a lot of damage, and Incineroar has as well. Fake Out is going to be a little bit of chip into Gothitelle, but Wolfe, I think, can play this a little slowly out. Kingdra, that -2, the Draco Meteor into the Incineroar will hold on with just a little bit. -4 now for the Kingdra, and its own health slowly but surely going away. So the Ice Beam follow-up, that'll actually put it in a position where we're now even at 2 apiece.
We're even at 2 apiece, but I think this is now a great spot for Wolfe to be in. Because the Tailwind and Trick Room are both still up, this means that Gothitelle has a chance to act first. This Incineroar cannot protect itself. You can go straight for the Psychic, and then you could encore the Porygon 2 to make sure it doesn't have the chance to recover for the rest of this game. And if it can't recover, those Ice Beams are doing super effective damage to Politoed, but Politoed is so bulky and doesn't have, especially with that leftovers, probably has enough in the tank to stick around for a few turns, fire off a couple more attacks into that Porygon 2, and probably win this game for Wolfe.
This has been so close, and it's all coming down to the Politoed. It's so fitting. Psychic, Incineroar, now it's just going to be this Porygon 2, and you called it. It can just be locked down, and it can be the saddest Porygon 2 out there in the world. But also, it's decently low health. You try and just do a little bit more with that Weather Ball. Not enough to KO. We saw it was the recover, but this is also where Wolfe can get the lockdown in the next turn.
It's true. I mean, you're not doing any damage this turn because you're going for recover. It's a bit of a trade-off here because Sure, your Porygon's going to stick around another turn or two, but like, do you have the damage to get through this Gothitelle and the leftovers Politoed? That especially is going to be really tough for Marco to break, especially considering as soon as Politoed goes for a move that Wolfe wanted to use for the rest of the game, Encore is still on the table. Not to mention Gothitelle doing some okay damage with Psychic, has the chance for those special defense drops as well, which we saw come into play in that first game.
At least when you're looking at a Porygon 2 to try and close out this match, it's a little bit better posed than what we saw the Torkoal versus Politoed yesterday. A little bit of a better chance, but this damage slowly being done. With the Terastallization for the Politoed, that is going to be a nice little chunk, but no freeze means Politoed can retaliate. The Weather Ball, again, consistent.
No.
The critical hit, bringing it down to 5 HP. Just a sliver away from closing this out.
And if there was any chance for Marco to win this game, I think it just evaporated. The Twisted Dimensions returned to normal, and since Politoed acted last on the prior turn, it will go first on this next turn.
So Weather Ball, Politoed, the last little bit of damage, and with that, Wolfe Glick, a historic 10th regional win, taking down the Toronto Regional Championship. One of the best trainers competing again and again, proving it to everyone.